Good evening. I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Friday, February 17th. We begin the newscast tonight with the release of a highly anticipated report in Ottawa. The Public Order Emergency Commission says the Liberal government met the very high threshold for invoking the Emergencies Act amid the Freedom Convoy protests last winter. In a report released in Parliament today, Justice Paul Rouleau concludes a series of policing failures and a failure of federalism led to a situation that spun out of control in downtown Ottawa. He also says that most of the emergency measures were appropriate. Staying in Parliament, where top defense officials testified before a Commons committee this morning. Now, this was about efforts to track a suspected Chinese spy balloon over British Columbia. NORAD Deputy Commander Lieutenant General Alain Pelletier says the balloon passed through radar gaps, which affected the military's ability to track its flight path. Both he and Major General Paul Prévost of the Canadian Armed Forces Strategic Joint Staff say the balloon did not pass over anything of particular significance before it re-entered U.S. airspace. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians hoping to make a temporary home in Canada are still awaiting final approval under an emergency program which opened last March. On top of that, of the more than 540,000 who have received visas to come to Canada, only about 158,000 have made the journey. Randall Baron Chong, the founder of Pathfinders for Ukraine, says a Canadian visa is often considered an insurance policy. Now, this is because some people would prefer to stay in Europe, closer to home. The deadline for the completion of Rogers' $26 billion takeover of Shaw Communications has been extended. Rogers, Shaw, the Shaw Family Living Trust, and Québécois are once again pushing back the deadline to complete the deal. It's being bumped from today to the end of March. Now, this is because Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne has not approved the transfer of wireless spectrum licenses from Shaw to Québécois' Videotron subsidiary. The companies continue to work with the government to secure the final approvals. Over to the Atlantic now. The premiers of all four provinces plan to meet in Charlottetown next week. The meeting will be held on Monday. PEI Premier Dennis King is currently the chairman of the Council of Atlantic Premiers. The council did not release an agenda for the meeting. Moving to BC now, where avalanche forecasters say the snowpack is dangerous this season with persistent weaknesses. Officials with Avalanche Canada say 2 people were killed and another injured after they were caught in a slide Thursday near the town of Golden. The president of Ottawa-based e-commerce company Shopify says there are no more job cuts coming. Shopify was among the first tech giants around the world to lay off staff. It cut about 10% of its workforce last summer, or about 1,000 workers. It blamed the move on misjudging the growth of the e-commerce sector. A new report from Air Canada shows that its passenger and operating revenues soared to record highs in its fourth quarter. The airline is reporting a quarterly profit of $168 million, which is up from a loss of $493 million a year ago. Passenger revenues doubled on a year-over-year basis to just over $4 billion, and operating revenues jumped 71% to $4.68 billion. The emotional turmoil of a bitter labor dispute is taking its toll on the Canadian women's soccer team. They fell 2-0 to the U.S. in the opening match of the She Believes Cup last night. The Canadian women announced last Friday that they would not train or play until their grievances were addressed. They boycotted training the next day and had to be forced back on the field under threat of legal action by Canada Soccer. Well, some big news for Blue Jays fans. Sportsnet has decided it is not going to resume on-site radio broadcasts for Toronto Blue Jays road games this season. Instead, Ben Wagner will be providing remote coverage from a downtown Toronto studio. Longtime Blue Jays radio voice Jerry Horvath, who retired in 2018, says he's very disappointed in the network for making that decision. He says without in-person coverage, the audience gets cheated out of the full enjoyment of the baseball season. Manitoba singer-songwriter William Prince is to take the stage at one of the most legendary music venues, the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville. Mr. Prince, who is from the Peguis First Nation, says it will be great to walk on that stage and sing songs he wrote in the province. The Juno Award-winning folk country musician will perform on Saturday. He plans to perform songs off his newest album, Stand in the Joy, including his tune When You Miss Someone. Forum Daily's Energy Update is coming up next, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Up now, Forum Daily's Energy Update with Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. All yours, Dan.
Well, thanks very much for that, Nima. And again, another odd week in energy markets and energy prices. We looked at the cutback for the beginning of March by Russia of 500,000 barrels. That's on top of OPEC's decrease of 2 million barrels. And normally these things would have an impact, and originally they did. But again, the nature and the makeup of investors in the energy markets is no longer those taking, inventory, taking supply, delivering or processing energy products like oil, like gas, propane, natural gas, take your pick. What we have now are speculators, investors, money managers, hedgers, who really don't have a physical connection to the market and who are more driven by headline. So we have really good news for consumers, bad news for anybody who's got money in the energy sector. The nervous Nellies, following whatever happens in the Fed, are in fact running the show. And it's not just that. Good economic news, strong job numbers in the United States, good economic productivity from industry. Those are all seen as very, very negative signals because, of course, everyone knows that the U.S. Fed and other central bankers around the world who didn't turn the taps off soon enough last year and thought that we could continue to have stable, low mortgages much longer, are now in the process of literally crashing the economy by raising interest rates. And of course, interest rates aren't just, 5-6% and going up 0.5% or 0.25% at the time. They are actually cast at a time when there's a lot more debt, not just private debt, but public debt. So, 8%, or we're approaching it that here in Canada, could look a whole lot like the 18 to 21% that we saw back in the early 80s because of the level of debtedness of Canadians. And same, I think, applies to other countries, but no more precisely than here in wonderful Canada, where we have a government that has taken the liberty of substituting economic activity, killing pipelines, blocking our energy from getting to global markets, even though there's a huge demand for Canadian energy. And as a result, driving down the value of the Canadian dollar and driving up inflation. Yes, it's something you're not going to hear from central bankers because the reality is that they don't want to look at the elephant in the room. Stifling Canadian energy, preventing it from getting it to markets, telling Japan, telling Germany and the rest of them, you're not going to sell liquid natural gas or any form of natural gas, and they should find hydrogen, which of course is implausible and impossible without using massive amounts of electrolysis, which of course is derived from energy creation. Much of that has to be used by fossil fuels. The reality is that we're going to be looking at very tepid times for Canadians. Energy prices will continue to rise overall because of the value of the Canadian dollar, because Canada simply doesn't want to get back in the business of producing energy. And that's a tragedy that will be borne by all Canadians. That aside, this week we are likely to see about an average of 3 to 5 cent a litre decrease right across the country. So starting in Vancouver, look for prices to move down to the lower $80s, maybe $82. The rest of BC in the $65 range, coming down from $68. In some places as low as $55. We will see Alberta move well below $20 on average. Again, lower taxes. That means that many stations will be looking at $10, $15. Neighboring Saskatchewan and Manitoba still staying in the $44 to $42 range for Saskatchewan and $47 for Manitoba. Ontario, look at the $46 dropping to about $40. And in fact, watch for diesel to drop even faster, maybe down below $50 over the next week. That's just a price we haven't seen going back to November of 2021. As for Quebec, same thing. Diesel will fall, but also gasoline down 4 to 5 cents a liter, and we'll be likely looking at prices in the range of $1.54, $1.55. As far as the Maritimes are concerned, they too will benefit, but they have to wait until next Friday to get the benefit the rest of the country has. Again, I make my point: regulated prices don't work in an environment where we have internet, where we have price prediction, and really, other than making bureaucrats happy and getting them to second guess markets, it really doesn't do anything for consumers except hold off price decreases until the last minute. And of course, when you get price increases, they hold on, they immediately pass those on. So I don't see the advantage there, but unfortunately for the Maritimes, having that security blanket of regulated prices continues to hurt them perhaps more disproportionately than any other region in the country. Well, Nima, that's my wrap for this week. So hold off on gassing up. You can wait till this family day long weekend in many parts of the country. You're going to save a bit. This time next week, that should start to turn around. We'll talk next week. Thanks, Nima.
All right, thanks for that, Dan. Again, that was Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. Stay with us. When we come back, we're going to be turning to the world of crypto with our weekly crypto and digital asset update with Catherine Murray. So stay tuned. Welcome back. Up now, we have Forum Daily's weekly crypto and digital asset update with Catherine Murray, host of The Buck Stops Here. Take it away, Catherine.
Thanks, Seema. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your weekly crypto and digital asset update. I'm Catherine Murray. We are seeing cryptocurrencies rally this week. A little bit of a pullback this morning, but nonetheless, we have seen a nice rally in cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin, for one, is up at a 6-month high and above that $25,000 mark, or hit above that $25,000 mark, which is such a key level for investors to watch. As I said, we are seeing a little bit of a pullback today, but we'll see where these markets take us. Interestingly as well, OK's Exchange's token, which is OKB, is actually up by 35% over the past 7 days. So again, a nice buyback into some of these cryptocurrencies and a little bit more comfort within the space. So some stabilization that we're seeing in 2023 versus the decimation we saw in 2022. A lot of focus this week on regulations and the regulatory environment. For one, Binance's chief strategy officer has said that they believe that they will be paying fines to settle some ongoing investigations into historical gaps with respect to compliance. We're also hearing that the SEC did propose this week rules that will require investment managers to custody all clients' assets, including crypto, with qualified custodians. There has been a bit of a pushback on that, but we will see where it takes us. That is, again, the SEC's proposal. And again, really to try to ensure the protection of your assets. Also, of course, we've got an update on FTX. Recall that Sam Bankman-Fried was released on a $250 million bail bond. A lot of people were wondering, well, where did this money come from? $250 million. Well, it was revealed via CNBC this week that it is apparently coming from the faculty at Stanford and also Stanford University. Recall his parents are both professors at Stanford University. We're also, of course, learning that the bankruptcy lawyers, the FTX bankruptcy lawyers, are negotiating the return of $400 million from a hedge fund, Medulo. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. So I suppose some of the money that FTX had, they did diversify and put it into some of the hedge funds. And as I mentioned, as the creditors are trying to find the money to return, as the bankruptcy lawyers are trying to find the money to return to the creditors, this is one area that they have found some funds in the hedge fund world. Away from that, Galaxy Digital Holdings, the ticker there on the TSX is GLXY. They interestingly have established a subsidiary in the Bahamas. They've actually obtained a crypto license and also plan to have a physical operation for trading and custody of funds. Nima, I'll leave it there. Back to you.
All right, thanks for that, Catherine. Again, that was Catherine Murray, host of The Buck Stops Here. For more on the markets and the world of finance, be sure to tune in to Catherine on The Buck Stops Here. It airs at 9 a.m. Eastern right here on the News Forum Network. All right, turning back to Canada now, where a new plan takes aim at concerns over the transition away from fossil fuels. The Liberal government's plan to transition Canada's labor force to respond to climate change says a clean energy economy could create so many jobs that there may not be enough workers to fill them. It states that the transition will not lead to massive unemployment in energy towns. Now, this contradicts a claim by Alberta's premier, who says that the goal is to shut down the oil and gas industry. The 32-page plan says while demand for oil and gas will drop sharply, it will not disappear. It says many workers already have the skills to work in emerging sectors like hydrogen and biofuels. In other economic trends, the inflation rate has been slowing since last summer. But some economists think that the report for January will disrupt that trend. Recent reports have shown that prices have been rising at a slower pace since inflation peaked at 8.1% last June. TD Bank is forecasting price growth accelerated between December and January, largely due to higher gas prices. Statistics Canada is expected to release its consumer price index for January on Tuesday. The report will include last month's headline inflation rate, which compares prices to the same time last year. After a major cyber incident, Indigo Books and Music has created a temporary website for its customers. But the company says the website can only be used for browsing and not for buying goods. The retailer says it's continuing to work hard to restore its website after a cybersecurity incident hit the company more than a week ago. Indigo hasn't been able to process electronic payments or offer sales on its website since then. Forum Daily will be right back after the break. And up next, Ukraine calls for faster delivery of Western weapons. The death toll from a cyclone in New Zealand rises, and Brazil's Carnival returns. So stay tuned. Forum Daily will return shortly. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has told the Munich Security Conference that there is no alternative to speed. He made an appeal for more Western weapons during a video address to allies attending the meeting. He urged them to move faster to deliver military support to Ukraine. Mr. Zelensky says lives depend on speed. He compared Ukraine's struggle against the Russian invasion to the biblical fight between David and Goliath. He said his country has David's courage, but needs help in getting the sling. Meanwhile, in the Indian Ocean, Russia, China, and South Africa are set to begin naval drills off the coast of South Africa. The 10 days of exercises are seen as a demonstration of the country's close ties amid Russia's war in Ukraine. They will also coincide with the first anniversary of the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine on February 24th. In response to other military exercises between allies, North Korea is threatening to take, quote, unprecedentedly strong action against its rivals. The threat was made over a series of military drills planned between South Korea and the United States. The Friday warning comes from the North's foreign ministry and suggests that the country's weapons testing activities could resume soon. South Korea just announced a series of planned military drills with the U.S. to hone their joint response to the North's growing nuclear threat posture. Well, in the latest on a case of police brutality in the United States, 5 former Memphis officers made their first court appearance today. All 5 plead not guilty to second-degree murder and other charges in the death of Black motorist Tyree Nichols last month. The officers were fired after an internal investigation following the violent arrest and eventual death of Mr. Nichols. All are out on bond until their next hearing on May 1st. The judge asked for everyone's patience and civility despite high emotions in the case. He noted all defendants have the right to a fair trial. Rescue efforts continue in Turkey and Syria after a devastating earthquake. A child, a woman, and 2 men have been pulled alive from the rubble of the earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria 10 days ago. Police rescue crews in Antakya, Turkey, found 12-year-old Osman alive after retrieving 17 bodies from a collapsed building. The Turkish Disaster Management Agency now reports 41,732 people died in the 2 countries, but that number is expected to keep climbing as search teams retrieve more bodies. Well, the death toll is also rising after another natural disaster in New Zealand. Officials say that the death toll from Cyclone Gabriel has gone up. They say at least 8 people have lost their lives. However, they add that more than 4,500 people remain unaccounted for, some 4 days after the nation's most destructive weather event in decades. New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins says Cyclone Gabriel brought widespread flooding, landslides, and power outages. He adds that repairs will take some time. All right, turning our attention to another cyclone now. Cyclone Freddy is expected to make landfall on islands in the Indian Ocean early next week. It is expected to have the strength of a powerful Category 5 hurricane. It has only been 2 weeks since the less powerful tropical cyclone Chinesco devastated Madagascar, killing 30 people. The African countries of Mozambique, South Africa, Malawi, Zambia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe are on high alert for heavy rains and thunderstorms from Freddy next week. All right, well, back in the U.S., the head of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is trying to assure residents of East Palestine that they are safe. The residents were forced from their homes by a toxic train derailment in Ohio nearly 2 weeks ago. EPA Administrator Michael Reagan is asking residents in eastern Ohio near the Pennsylvania line to trust the government. He says that testing shows the air and water are now safe. Residents are frustrated by what they say is incomplete and vague information. India's finance ministry has accused the BBC of tax evasion. The agency says it has gathered evidence in 3 days of searches of the BBC's New Delhi and Mumbai offices. They say the evidence shows the UK broadcaster has not fully declared its income and profits from its operations in the country. Opposition parties and other news organizations see the searches as an attempt to intimidate the media. Well, on a lighter note, Brazil's Carnival is back. The government is predicting 46 million people will join in the festivities, which start today and run through Mardi Gras on Tuesday. Glittery and outrageous costumes are being prepared, and samba songs are ringing out at Rio de Janeiro's sold-out parade grounds. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily News.